Thank you for the warm sentiments, and thank you and everyone else who was involved in setting up this new tradition of the HaAtzmut men's breakfast. Just a few words, just so that we can elevate this otherwise wonderful Suda with a little Torah. I want to start by sharing an idea that I first was exposed to in one of the Sichot of Rav Zalman Melamed, of Rosh Hashiva of Beit El, and kind of combined it perhaps with an idea that is connected to something from Rav Soloveitchik, a little bit of my own, and hopefully do all of that in a relatively brief amount of time. The Rabbi Yechezkel is one of the prophets we know who was Al Naharot Bavel. He was dealing with, of course, difficult period in Jewish history and Churban and difficult prophecies. That was part of the underlying story of the whole issue of the Haftorahs of the last 2 weeks was Yechezkel. And in Perek Lamed Vav, in Psukim Chaf, Psukim thereafter, this is one of the examples of a really, really difficult nevuah from Yechezkel. And there he describes with great pain, Vayovu el hagoyim asher bo sham, the Jewish people have been kicked out of their land, they're going to go to the nations from which now they are sent. V'yechalu l'shem kachi, there's a tremendous chil Hashem, B'amor lahem am Hashem Eila, u'me'artza yatsu. When they see the Jewish people in Golus, they will say, this is a terrible chil Hashem. And Rashi quotes from the Medrash in Eicha Rabbah that notes the Lashon Yachid. Instead of saying Vayava'u, it says Vayavo in singular. Vayavo el Goyim asher ba'u sham. Millions of Jews. Should have been in the plural. So Rashi first gives one answer al derech hapshat. When you talk about the Jewish people, that can be in the singular form. But then he quotes the Medrash. The Medrash says something amazing. Why is it B'Lashon Yachid? Because Vayavu el Hagoyim is not referring to the Jewish people. Vayavu el Hagoyim, says Rashi, Zu HaKadosh Baruch Hu asher ba'i mahem b'gola. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as it were, Kavayachal HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself went into Golus with us. That's why it is in a Lashon Yachid. This is an example of the well-known idea, Chazal in Eicha Rabbah and in other places discussed, of Imo Anochi B'Tzara. The idea of Kadosh Baruch Hu, Kaviyachol, also suffering along with us. And there are many examples in the literature of Chazal. Goes back to the Sneh, Rashi and Chumash and Shmos, makes that expression famous for us. And this is an example that it's not limited to the Churban, but many, many midrashim about the Churban make this idea of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, as it were, suffering with us. However, the Medrash continues, as quoted there by Rashi, and therefore addresses, if HaKadosh Baruch Hu is there, if he's hearing what's going on, if he's experiencing it, what is the Chil Hashem that's being described? Says Rashi, and if you want to take a look, the Radak on the Pasuk also elaborates on the idea as well. It says Rashi here, quoting from Chazal, the people were saying that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hita Ozen, as it were. HaKadosh Baruch Hu was listening, he was eavesdropping on what the captors were saying about him and all the other Jews who were coming into Bavel. Harei Elu Am Hashem. This is the people of God. V'lo haya lo yecholet lahatzila. What was the Chil Hashem? The very fact that we went into Golus seems to indicate that HaKadosh Baruch Hu couldn't save us. That he couldn't protect us. We're the chosen nation, and nevertheless, we get sent into Golus, we get sent into Bavel. And that itself is the Chil Hashem. As the Pasuk continues and says, Vayechalu Hashem Kachi, Rashi says, Uma'achilu, Ba'amor Ovehem Alehem, when the Goyim will say, the enemies will say, Am Hashem Eila, Ume'artza Yatsu, V'lo haya yecholet biyado lahatzilas amo ve'es artza. HaKadosh Baruch Hu couldn't save them. He couldn't protect them. And that itself is a tremendous Chil Hashem. In other words, what do we see from this Rashi? What are Chazal teaching us? Something astounding. The Metzias of Golus is the Metzias of Chil Hashem. You don't have to go to Camp Mosheva. You don't have to wear a shoelace shirt. This is Rashi. This is Chazal. This is non-sectarian, non-partisan. This is as mainstream as it gets. And those of us, almost everyone I think in the room, but one person, I guess now we know Avram was also born in Eretz Yisrael, so maybe two. We have some children. But for the rest of us, who were born in Chutz La'aretz, children of Chutz La'aretz. So we take it for granted. We were born, we know in the abstract maybe it's better to be in Israel, but I don't think we really realize the actual implications, the way Chazal looked at Golus. Again, it's understandable after 2,000 years, you can forget this and you can adapt to it. But from Chazal's perspective, and certainly at the time, Golus isn't just an Onesh, it's a Chil Hashem. It's the greatest Chil Hashem because it looks like God is impotent. Or that he doesn't care about us. Pick your poison, but they're both terrible. So what's amazing is the parrot continues. And just a few psukim later, we read, "V'kidashti eshmi hagadol mechulo b'goyim." Hashem says there will be a kiddush Hashem in the very place where there had been that chil Hashem. V'yedu hagoyim ki ani Hashem ne'um Hashem Elokim v'kdashi b'chem le'ineihem. And I will make a kiddush Hashem in front of your eyes. So this terrible chil Hashem will eventually be followed by a kiddush Hashem. What is the kiddush Hashem that's being referred to? Not clear in this pasuk. So Rashi there on the pasuk says, you just got to keep on reading, like what my 5th grade Gemara Rabbi told me. Right? Most of the questions you'll have in learning are answered if you just keep on reading. Not all, but most. So what's the very next pasuk? Pasuk Chavdalid. V'lakachti eschem min hagoyim v'kibatzi eschem mikol haratzos ve'evi eschem el admaschem. The very Kiddush Hashem is return to Eretz Yisrael. The very mitzias of Jews coming back to Eretz Yisrael is, in and of itself, an act of Kiddush Hashem. If being forced to leave Eretz Yisrael is a Chil Hashem, says Rashi, the very fact of coming back, of Kibbutz Golios, is a Kiddush Hashem. This is something that's really quite incredible. And what I think, in a very, very short, succinct way, what Rashi and the Chazal are alluding to, is something that we appreciate even more with the perspective of history. And it was really actually the main theme of the Rav's, Rav Soloveitchik's famous drasha, Kol Dodi Dofek, when he spoke about how the Hakamat HaMedina, the establishment of the state of Israel, was in essence HaKadosh Baruch Hu sending a message to us and throughout history, as he put it using the metaphor of Shir HaShirim, with 6 knocks. The beloved HaKadosh Baruch Hu was turning back to his people, knocking on the door, saying, I'm ready for a rendezvous with our love affair. And he doesn't just knock once, but he knocks 6 times, according to Rav Soloveitchik. 6 different aspects of the establishment of the state of Israel, which are a Kiddush Hashem. And one of those, said Rav Soloveitchik, exactly relates to the Chazal, to the Medrash we started with. The Catholic Church had a doctrine. The question is whether they still believe it or not, it's a different question. But they still had a doctrine for thousands of years, hundreds of years, more than 1,000 years, called supersessionism. That is to say, yes, of course we believe the Jews were the original chosen people. But clearly their chosenness is no longer relevant. It is evaporated. It is expired. They have been superseded by a new covenant, a new nation that's been chosen, those who believe what they believe. And what's their proof that the Jewish people are no longer the chosen people, that they have been superseded by a new covenant? Look around, look at Golus. You see the Jewish people are dispersed. They're not just dispersed, they're persecuted, they're impoverished, they're poor. Is that the way God would let them be if he really loved them? Is that the way God would choose? And this was, you look in the medieval literature, this was the greatest argument that the original Catholics and Christians would use against the Jewish people, known as the doctrine of supersessionism. And said Rav Soloveitchik in 1948, when there was a return to the state of Israel in a formal sense, not only people living here one by one, but a sovereign Jewish state and land of Israel, that was one of the ultimate acts of Kiddush Hashem, because it was the ultimate raya, that was the ultimate in your face, as it were. The dull doctrine of supersessionism came crashing down in one day, as we came back, and they were no longer had that argument. That's, again, it could be just old-fashioned anti-Semitism. But it's also, we can understand it from their perspective. If you're a believing Catholic, to make peace in your mind, intellectual sense of the state of Israel, is very, very difficult. It explains a lot of the Catholic Church's very conflicted relationship for the last 75 years with Israel. Again, it could be just old-fashioned Jew hatred, but it's not only that. Medina Israel is one big steerer to their entire belief. How would you deal with that if it was in the roles, if the shoe was on the other foot? It's not a simple place to be. I'm not Rahmanas on them, I couldn't care. But we just understand from their perspective, the whole state of Israel is one big shtach. If I could use the academic term. Right? It's one big shtach to their belief. They thought we were replaced, and their proof was, look, you don't have Israel anymore. Now we do. They've lost that trump card. The ultimate Kiddush Hashem is the establishment of the state of Israel. And what is interesting, if I can return to a point that many make, but Malamed makes in this Sikha as well, is that sometimes, I'm not saying necessarily the people in this room, but maybe even some of us sometimes, and certainly other people in the broader Frum community, we say, okay, yes, but look at the people who were the original Zionists. Look at the people who were the original founders of the state. They were secular, in many cases, not just secular, but atheists, in many cases, not just secular and atheists, but anti-religious. You think they had any of this in mind? You think they had kavanah for this big, great theological victory, this great statement of Avodas Hashem and Ruchnius? And the answer is obviously not. And yet I think Rav Malamed is overwhelmingly correct, as he points out, the Mishnah Perkei Avos, Echad Shogeg ve'echad Mezid b'chil Hashem. When it comes to Chil Hashem, the Mishnah Perkei Avos is very adamant. Intent is irrelevant. Chil Hashem is all about results. Lots of things in life are about effort, Talmud Torah, right? We say that in the Siyum, Anu Ratzin v'hei Ratzin, right? It doesn't matter what level you're learning on, you're trying. That's all true. There are a lot of participation trophies when it comes to learning, for example. But in Chil Hashem, says the Mishnah in Perkei Avos, there's only one thing. Either you're the winner or you're the loser. There's no ace for effort in Chil Hashem. It's not about intent, it's not how much you tried. If you made a Chil Hashem, even by accident, you're culpable. That's a Mishnah Perkei Avos. And we just saw that the whole Golus was one big Chil Hashem. But if that's true, and as Rashi says, that Kibbutz Goliath and coming back to establishing a Jewish state of Israel is a Kiddush Hashem, again, not just religious Zionist doctrine, it's a Rashi, it's a Chazal. So if that's the case, as a Malamed, Echad HaShogeg, Echad HaMezid, but Kiddush Hashem as well. Kiddush Hashem is also about results. And therefore, it doesn't matter whether the original founders of the state had this intent, they didn't have this intent, they went to the mikveh before they signed the Declaration of Independence, they hit Himuni before they established the state of Israel. It doesn't matter. Echad HaShogeg, Echad HaMezid. When it comes to Kiddush Hashem or Chil Hashem, it's all about the results. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for whatever reason we don't know, HaKadosh Baruch Hu chose those people in decades and generations of people who came after them. And Ada Yom Hazeh, the people who fought with Avram, with Eli, with Ari, shoulder to shoulder, risking their lives, doing acts of Mesiras Nefesh, so that there could be a free and flourishing and healthy Medinat Yisrael for all of us. Medinat Yisrael, which, as we know, but is not often appreciated enough, is not only where more Torah is being learned than anywhere else, the biggest supporter of Kollel in the history of the world is the secular state of Israel. They are the ultimate Gvir. They are the ultimate Shver. They are the Nagid par excellence that everyone seems to worship in the Torah world. The biggest support, there's no Gvir, you add them all up, and they don't give in history what the state of Israel can give in 1 year, just to support Torah. So the Kiddush Hashem that has emanated not only from our flourishing of Startup Nation and all the other things that we're doing, but even just the Torah that's happening in the state of Israel. None of it happens without the people, whether they intended it or not, did what they needed to do, did what they could to help be there for us. All that being said, just to conclude, it's obvious that even if, and I say this without any reservation, they deserve the credit and they deserve the schar, whether they were looking for it or not, because even accidentally they created this tremendous Kiddush Hashem. Undoubtedly, those of us who are not only participating in the Kiddush Hashem by accident, incidentally, but those who b'kavana, with intention and forethought, have chosen to participate in this Kiddush Hashem, al achas kama v'kama is our schar, and we have what to be proud of. The psukim that we are most familiar with that talk about the return, Shivat Zion, we all know these psukim in Yirmiyah, Perek Lamed Aleph, Kol Hashem, Mini Kolech Mibechi. I know you've been crying for so many centuries and millennia of Golos, but one day there will come a time you won't have to cry anymore. Yesh Chana Lepulatech Num Hashem, V'shavu Me'eretz Oyev. You'll return from the Golos, you'll return from your enemy's homeland. The very next pasuk we seem to repeat ourselves. Yesh Tikal Akrisech Num Hashem, and again, once again, Vishavu banim ligvulam. So many years ago, I saw a beautiful idea in the name of Nachman Kahana, the author of the Mei Menuchos on Shas, brother of Meir Kahana, big Talmid Chacham from Yerushalayim. He pointed out there's two anomalies, not only the repetition, why the need for the repetition in the Psukim, but also how come in the first Pasuk it mentions Eretz Oyev, doesn't mention it in the second Pasuk, but in the second Pasuk it refers to us as Banim, but not in the first Pasuk, doesn't refer to us at all. He explained beautifully that the Navi is referring to two different forms, two different examples of Shivat Zion. There is a time in history, even now in many cases, in which people returned to the land of Israel, v'shavu me'aretz oyev, because they needed to. They were desperate. Because the Goyim were killing us, was anti-Semitism, their persecution, and most of Jewish history, they had nowhere to run. They were going from the fox to the lion to the wolf, from Minsk to Pinsk to Lvov. And thankfully, there are pockets of Jewish history where we had an ability, v'shavu me'aretz oyev. We could run and find our freedom. And Baruch Hashem, we know the history of the state of Israel. All the Arab lands, of course Ethiopia, Russian Jewry. So many people, Ad Yom Hazeh, have to flee from Eretz Oyev. Baruch Hashem, they have a place to go. They can come to Israel. But that's, of course, a lower level. The next pasuk says there's an even higher level. Not when you're running away from anything. There's no Oyev. Rather, v'shavu banim l'gula. You come back, not because you have to, not because America is so bad, not because Golos is so bad, but v'shavu banim l'gula. Because a child wants to be with his mother. A child wants to come home. And of course that, by and large, at least until very recently perhaps, has been the story of American Aliyah, North American Aliyah, our Aliyah. No one who's here had to run away from anything. In many of the cases, we had wonderful lives in America, big houses, comfortable jobs, bigger salaries, and we didn't run from anything. We came to something. Shavu banim levulam. We wanted to be home. And there was something in our neshamas that just understood that wherever we are, as comfortable as it is, as affluent as maybe it was, but we weren't home. There's only one home. So we're grateful to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that for those who need to run the Eretz Oyev, now they have a place to go. But there's an even higher level, of course, and that is the Shavu Banim L'Gula. And just to conclude and tie this up with what we started with, if there's a Kiddush Hashem to returning to the land of Israel, and all of us are part of that, especially those of us who didn't just run from an enemy, but Shavu Banim L'Gula, what emerges is not only that the state of Israel is the greatest Kiddush Hashem, certainly in our lifetime, in many lifetimes, it's not only, and it's not really that we are the witnesses to the Kiddush Hashem, we are the Kiddush Hashem. It is a tremendous chus, it's a tremendous honor to count myself among this special group. It's an even greater honor to be the Rav of such a special community. I know that in many places there's a certain insecurity that Olim communities have, not Israeli enough, and all this stuff. And as many of you know, my attitude is just the opposite. I lean into it. I am very proud of being an Oleh. I am proud of being an immigrant. I'm not completely embarrassed about my Hebrew. If anything, I'm proud of it because all the mistakes I make or the mispronunciations are a sign that it's actually not natural at all. It's really, really hard because I'm an immigrant, because I'm an Oleh. And I don't feel any less Israeli or less authentic. Adarabah. If I think about anything I've accomplished in my life, how many things have I done? How many things will I do? More important than that, to have my little piece, my small piece, in the greatest Kiddush Hashem in who knows how many centuries. So we all have so much to be grateful for, not only for what we experience here, we really should be grateful for the schus, as I said, not just to be the witnesses to the Kiddush Hashem, but to be the actual Kiddush Hashem. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu continue to increase, expand, and deepen this incredible Kiddush Hashem. May it continue to help the army prosecute this war, hopefully efficiently, speedily, and most importantly, successfully and safely. And may we come together again next year to celebrate Yom HaAtzmut, but hopefully without the need for the pain that we've experienced over the last 7 months. And Emir Hashem, we should continue to go Mechayil El Chayil. Amen.